How long did this crazy challenge take you? Talk me through like actually physically doing it. A trip. How far did you run in the end?
78 miles. So I
That's
started in
ridiculous.
Corsham, which was location number one, a tap room just literally at the top of my road. So I started there. Um, we're
Did you
talking
did you
10
have
in the
a
morning.
sneaky half just to kind of get you going?
Right, do you know, the running, yeah, whatever, hard. I'd anticipated that. Stopping at 12 of my favourite pubs and not being able to have a drink. Now, that was way
Did you have a
harder.
little kind of refreshment tipple
I
in
had
Cleveland?
a
A shot of
radler
beer.
at the last location in Bristol when the sun was out. So we're talking like a really sessionable beer with some, they do it with a fizzy orange, but with some fizzy orange in it. So thirst
You're
quenching
just like, give me
delicious.
that.
But honestly, there's a picture of me like downing this bucket of it.
Yeah.
But at 10 in the morning, bit of Lucasade and some jokes to kick it all off. And it was adorable because it was all local people in Corsham, loads of kids. So a few of my jokes, a few of the ones the kids chucked in. You know all the stuff. So one of the kids threw in what's got four legs, green, and would kill you if it fell out of a tree. Snooker table. So this is the level we're talking at 10 in the morning. All of my expletives left for later on in the day. But then yeah, so the ITV guy said, right, we'll all count you down from 10 and I'll stand at the end of the road and record you running towards me. Then you'll go back to the start and we'll count down from 10 again and I'll record you running next to you. And I thought, that's embarrassing, isn't it? If my kids looked embarrassed counting down from
Yeah.
10
Let's
twice.
not forget, though, that Ben is a PR guru. So at the moment, everything you've said is literally you are a PR person's dream. I can just feel Ben here like she's a PR absolute wonder. We love her.
It is, do you know what it is? It's because it's so heartfelt. Like, but everything about this, none of this is orchestrated. None of this is with any intention that you want to find fame or get something out of this. This is literally you wanting to say thank you to the people that saved your life, and that is something so refreshing because it feels like with everything, there's always an agenda these days, and you just doing this to say thank you is so special.
In pink lycra, though, that was definitely,
Do you know why that happened? Because I left it all to the last minute, and the ones that I usually run in when I go running in the morning lost so much elastic in them that I basically am like freaking them up the whole time. But that's not a good look on ITV. So I literally a few days before went on Amazon and bought whichever ones could be delivered in time, which is pretty cool. But yeah, honestly, and then so yeah, went from Corsham to Bath. By which time it was getting to a time that you could have a bit more fun with the jokes. Then from Bath to Bristol, which was hot. And then in Bristol, six of the locations were really quite close together, which was loads and loads of fun, but really hard turning down endless beers on a sunny afternoon. But I
Mm.
had my QR code on my back, so I'd sort of do the jokes and then turn around and say, look, whether you want to sponsor me or not, I have to do comedy sets at each location. So if you don't want to sponsor me, just hold your phone up and pretend you are, and then I'll leave and move on to the next one. So it's a bit of cheesiness, but I just wanted to make sure I had photos at every location and moved on. But my children were able to meet me at a couple of locations as like my support crew, driving around at different places. And I think most people on a race like this would be doing like energy gels and all this sort of thing. All I fancied on a hot, sunny afternoon was a crisp sandwich. So I kept stopping and having a crisp sandwich while running on the spot and then running on again. And then, yeah, so the last one in Bristol was where I had this lovely pint of Radler. A couple of my old uni mates came and met me there. It's just, you know, I didn't know they were going to, but they did, which was lovely. But then that was the last time I was going to see my kiddies until the next day. So they waved me off and everyone was sort of cheering. And out of this last place in Bristol was a really, really steep hill. And I knew that everyone could see me. So I'm trying to sort of turn around and wave and put on a bit of an impressive performance in about like 85-degree heat mid-afternoon.
Oh
It was
man.
quite
with a crisp
tricky.
sandwich and a beer and a QR
Honestly,
code.
honestly, it's so weird, isn't it? But I don't know why. That's
No,
what I
I love
really
a crisp
fancied.
sandwich. Do you know what? There is no judgment here. It is
I
the
reckon because it
epitome.
was a hot day, I sort of needed
Yeah.
the
The
salt
salt.
or something.
Salt.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna say it's a pretty weird running snack, but you do you. give me jelly babies any day of the week when running.
Yeah, this is it. Normally it's just anything for a bit of the sugar rush.
I mainly
isn't it?
just use running as an excuse to eat sweets, to be honest.
Since my accident with the no smell thing, I don't eat much sweet stuff at all. But it affects your taste palate so much. I don't drink wine anymore because it doesn't taste of anything at all. Don't eat chocolate. It's got
Wow.
like a nasty mouthfeel. So I'm now obsessed with crisp sandwiches, cork scratchings, Bombay mix. Yeah.
So I was gonna say that the accident has made you really healthy, but it really, not so much.
It's maybe a cheap date, look, beer and pork scratchings.
2 pints of lager and a packet of crisps. Claire's there.
But I've got loads of weird allergies since my accident as well, which means loads of foods that used to be my favourite, I can't even eat anymore. So it's really hard to find a healthy, balanced diet that A, tastes of anything, and B, I can eat. Like a lot of things that would be comfort food. It's kind of all you want after an accident, isn't it? A big bowl of like comforting food. So yeah, that's really tricky. That are loads of things I used to think of as absolute either Michelin star or comfort. I can't even eat anymore. So trying to get the balance is tricky. I've actually I'm sort of a Southwest ambassador for a charity called Smell Taste, which is all for people that have anosmia or geusia, which is no taste, a sense of taste. Anosmia is the no sense of smell, but they're so intrinsically linked anyway, that it's genuinely devastating because most people lose their sense of smell either through a severe brain injury or cancer treatment, so chemotherapy or radiotherapy. So you're already sort of going through quite a difficult period, and it's just so underestimated how devastatingly horrible it is. So yeah, I miss the smell of fish and chips. I grew up on the beach. Yes, I miss the taste of Sauvignon Blanc and a lovely bit of sea bass, but I miss like smelling my kids' heads and things like that. Like I love the smell of children, and yeah, this is one of the most impactful things. It makes you feel like you're watching your life on telly when you can't smell it. Like any other senses, you can choose to use them. If you want to feel Christmassy, you can watch The Holiday or put a Christmas record on. Or if you want to, remember the first dance at your wedding, you can put the music on or what have you. But your sense of smell, you don't so much use it on purpose. You'll be out for a walk and smell some creosote that reminds me of creosoting the fence with my dad. Or I used to go in Boots and spray my nana's perfume on one of the testing strips to remind me of my childhood when she was around. And I hate not having that. It's also the bit of my brain that's damaged, the hippocampus, is where you store your memories as well. And sometimes to remember something, you want to smell it. So it's genuinely really, really horrible. So yeah.
And it's unseen, isn't it? Like looking at you today, you know, you can't look at somebody and go, well, they can't smell. Like you just wouldn't know. And all that stuff is just the sort of hidden, I guess, ongoing sort of trauma, right, that you're suffering. So no, it is.
People say the most ridiculous things. Like I say, I never want any sympathy from people, but I do love it when someone says, "Oh, that must be really shit." Like when I say it makes me feel like a pretty crappy mum and I've got 4 kids, and when it's the holidays and I've got a day off, I say, "Look, guys, where are we going to walk to today?" It's so limiting. That's like pull myself out of a football club and things like that because I just can't get them places. So it is. I just want people to say things like, "Oh, that sounds rubbish." But whenever I say about the smell thing, people just don't get it at all. So they either say things like, "At least you don't have to put up with your son's stinking bedroom," or when I said I don't eat chocolate anymore, I dyed my hair Cadbury's purple on Easter because I was so pissed off that I can't taste chocolate anymore. And one of the mums at the school said, "Look on the bright side though, at least you'll lose weight."
No. Do you know what? I can't imagine.
Did you say that while she had 6-pack of pork scratchings in your hand?
Yeah, this is it. It's like, what is very unbalanced this
Do you know what? I can't even imagine, Claire. So I lost for 1 week when I had COVID once. You know, when like COVID did that funny thing where you lost your sense of smell and taste. And it was literally like Chinese water torture. And like my dad had to have some polyps removed from his nose the other year. And he's actually lost his sense of smell and taste as well from that. And I always say to him, I just don't know how you go through, because for me, 1 week was like Chinese water torture. It was hell because it just messes with your head, doesn't it? You're like, things like, it's there to know if things are gone off or taste right or, so you're like, is this okay? I don't know. It's weird.
It makes you so like when people say, well, at least you don't have to smell your kid's bedroom or portaloos at festivals or whatever, it makes you way more concerned about. So yeah, there's the things like we've got a gas cooker. I wouldn't even know if it were leaking. I burn everything now because you don't know, and I'm a good cook. But when you're a mum trying to do a million things and you can't smell anything, you're like, oh, dinner's a bit buggered again. But also it's like your own, like when I went back to work after my accident, way too soon afterwards, I just didn't like being at home on my own. I had to do like an 8-mile round trip to get to work because I couldn't ride my bike. So you turn up at work on a sunny day when you've speed walked from the school run and you don't know if you smell. And so you assume you do. So you're just endlessly spraying yourself. And then if you do go in a place where there's a communal toilet like there was at work, if someone is walking out before me, a boy looking really sheepish, you think, right, the toilet might stink now and I don't know. So I'm not only am I sitting in a cloud of it, when I come out, I feel like I need to say to the next person, if that stinks, it wasn't me, which makes you look so guilty. It's ridiculous. So it's stupid little things like that. But there was an article in the paper just the other day, in the Week magazine, and I sort of knew the stats already, but the same number of people that suddenly become anosmic get severe depression as people that have had a stroke. That's how impactful it is on your life. It's just horrible and it's never coming back. And, you wouldn't see someone walking down the road with a dog, a guide dog, and say, let me take that off you, see if you can still walk in a straight line. So when people say really hurtful, glib things, you sort of laugh it off, but think, do you know, that really... it's never coming back because it's not due to like a viral sort of infection thing. It's a dead brain thing. That's also linked to the epilepsy and the tiredness and the lost memories. So to belittle it is really callous.
Do you think it's more people though? It's like they don't know what to say. It's like an uncomfortable thing. That's the thing. I think it is. And I guess because it's not so like guide dogs, we're used to guide dogs, aren't we? We're used to seeing, we kind of know what the right thing is. We grew up knowing, our parents would say to us, don't say the wrong thing. Whereas actually with this, I guess, because it's so hidden, people just don't know what to say. And obviously intrinsically, we always just end up saying the wrong thing as humans.
Yeah.
Honestly, this is one thing that not just the anosmia, but this is something that's really taught me about my accident. I basically get out your tiny violins. I basically have no friends now because people don't know what to say to me. I'm no fun, really, because like if I'm doing a late night stand-up gig, I have to have like a early night the night before or a little sleepy woo power nap before because it's really tricky trying to be funny at 10 o'clock at night when you get really tired in the evenings. So I guess I don't go out that much. People don't know what to say to me. And this is the one that breaks my heart, people say I'm lucky, but they don't mean lucky to be alive. They mean lucky because I'm apparently going to get some enormous payout. Right. I would take any amount of money I'm ever going to get, times it by whatever amount, to smell my kids' heads. I'm not even kidding. Or to really enjoy a glass of wine or the smell of a Christmas tree. I hate that now. I love the smell of a Christmas tree. So and most people have just sort of abandoned me because they either are jealous or they don't know what to say. So it has taught me that if someone is going through a hard time or you see someone, they look a bit sad, it is worse to do nothing than it is just to go up and say, so sorry, and tell me if I'm sticking my nose in where it's not wanted, but are you okay? Is there anything I can do? Do you want a hug? So when I did a presentation at the air ambulance the other day, I was walking back to get the bus home. I saw a lady sitting down looking really, really sad, and she was outside of Vets. And I thought, there's so obviously something wrong here. I'm not just going to walk past. So yeah, I think you are so right. Parents say, don't they, when you're growing up, you've got nothing good to say, don't say anything at all, or stiff up a lip, don't stick your nose in. I just wish all my mates stuck their nose in more because then I could, without whinging, I could just explain a bit better what a difference it's made to me and why I am a certain way now.